Think about who raised you. Your mother, probably. Maybe your father. Two people tops in most of the stories you tell about your childhood. But that story is wrong. Not wrong in a small way. Wrong in a way that reshapes almost everything you assume about family. Because for most of human history, you would not have survived infancy on two parents alone. You needed a village. And the strange part is, biologically, you still do. Start with a simple number. Human babies are helpless for an absurdly long time. A baby chimpanzee can cling to its mother's fur within hours of birth. A human infant cannot even hold up its own head. It will take years before that same child can feed itself, protect itself, or survive a single night alone in the wild. Somewhere in our evolutionary past, something went badly wrong with the math. Mothers who nurse one dependent infant for years, while also caring for older children, while also gathering enough food to survive, should not have been able to raise multiple children in a lifetime. The energy costs do not add up. And yet, human populations grew. Something was subsidizing the mother. Something was picking up the slack. That something was everyone else. Anthropologist Hrdy spent decades studying primate mothering, and she noticed something odd about humans compared to almost every other great ape. Chimp mothers barely let anyone touch their infants. Gorilla mothers are similarly possessive. But human mothers across cultures hand their babies to others constantly. Grandmothers, aunts, older siblings, neighbors, friends. Hrdy called this cooperative breeding, and she argued it was not a cultural accident. It was a biological necessity, hardwired into the reason our species survived at all. Humans, she suggested, are the only great ape that evolved to require alloparents. That is the technical term for caregivers who are not the biological parent. Not babysitters, not help. Structural requirements. Here is where it gets stranger. If cooperative care was optional, you would expect it to appear only in hard times, only in emergencies, only when a mother was sick or absent. But the evidence points somewhere else entirely. It points to a specific figure who may be one of the most underrated forces in human evolution: the grandmother. Anthropologist Kristen spent years among the Hadza, a hunter-gatherer community in Tanzania, and noticed something that did not fit the standard story of human evolution. Older women, long past their own reproductive years, were among the hardest-working foragers in the group. They were not resting. They were not sidelined. They were feeding grandchildren, freeing up mothers to have more children sooner, and directly increasing the survival odds of the next generation. Hawkes proposed something now known as the grandmother hypothesis. Menopause, she argued, is not a biological accident or a flaw in the system. It may be one of the most important adaptations in human history. A woman who stops reproducing herself, but redirects that energy toward her grandchildren, can increase her genetic legacy more than one who keeps having children of her own. Evolution, in other words, may have selected for grandmothers on purpose. Think about what that means. Somewhere in your ancestry, a version of humanity existed where survival was quite literally a group project, coded into biology itself. Not a nice idea, not a cultural value someone invented later, an engine of natural selection. And it did not stop with grandmothers. Anthropologists studying groups like the Efe in Central Africa found infants who were held, nursed, or cared for by more than a dozen different individuals within their first few months of life. Aunts, cousins, family friends, sometimes entirely unrelated community members. This was not neglect. This was the design. A human infant in this ancestral context was never the responsibility of one or two people. It was the responsibility of a network. Now here is the twist that should genuinely unsettle you. If cooperative caregiving was the environment your biology was built for, what happens when you remove it? Because that is exactly what modern life has done. The nuclear family 2 parents, 1 household, minimal outside involvement, is a remarkably recent invention. For the overwhelming majority of the roughly 200,000 years Homo sapiens has existed, this arrangement would have looked bizarre, even dangerous, isolated, fragile, a single point of failure. Yet it has become, in much of the industrialized world, the default unit of child rearing. Parents today are often expected to do alone what evolution assumed would be distributed across 10 or more adults. This helps explain something researchers have long puzzled over. Rates of parental burnout, postpartum depression, and chronic exhaustion among new parents are strikingly high in societies with the least communal childcare support. It is not simply that modern parenting is harder emotionally. It may be that modern parents are attempting a task that human biology never evolved to have 1 or 2 people perform solo. You are not failing at an ancient job. You are attempting a modified version of it, stripped of the very support system it was built around. There is a phrase used in some anthropological literature, allo-mothering deficit. It describes what happens to both children and parents when the expected web of alternate caregivers simply is not there. Children raised with fewer alloparents show, in some studies, differences in social trust and emotional regulation. Not damage, exactly. Adaptation to a different environment. Your nervous system, after all, calibrates itself to whatever world it is born into. But it was designed with an assumption. The assumption of many hands, many voices, many laps to sit on. Remove that, and something subtle shifts. So why did the shift happen at all? Industrialization scattered extended families across cities and continents. Economic pressure pulled people away from the villages and multi-generational households where alloparenting once thrived naturally. Privacy became a virtue. Independence became a value. The very idea of relying on neighbors to help raise your child began to feel, in some cultures, like an admission of failure rather than a return to design. But look closely at the cultures where extended family still lives under one roof, where grandmothers still play an active daily caregiving role, where community childcare is normalized rather than outsourced for a fee, and you find something familiar reappearing. Lower reported parental stress, stronger multi-generational bonds, children with more adults they trust unconditionally. This is not a call to nostalgia. Nobody is suggesting you abandon modern life for a hunter-gatherer camp, but it does reframe something. The next time you watch a parent struggling alone with a screaming toddler in a grocery store, at midnight, at 3 in the morning, exhausted beyond words, you are not watching someone who is bad at their job. You are watching someone attempting a task in an environment fundamentally different from the one that task was built for. And it reframes something about yourself, too. Somewhere in the architecture of your personality, your sense of trust, your comfort or discomfort around strangers holding you as a baby, your instinct to reach for a grandparent, an aunt, a family friend, is a signature of something ancient. Not sentiment, strategy. Cooperative breeding did not just keep our ancestors alive, it shaped the emotional wiring of every human being who came after. So go ahead, think about who raised you again. Not just the 2 names on your birth certificate. The aunt who fed you when your mother could not. The neighbor who held you as an infant so someone else could sleep. The grandmother who was not resting in her later years, but working, quite literally, to keep you alive. You were never the product of 2 people. You were the product of a network built by millions of years of evolution, one that whispered a single instruction across every generation before you. This child is not yours alone to raise.